welcome back to my channel. My name is Reza-Astrid and today we're going to be doing something different for today's video. We're actually going to be reading one of my favorite books. Not the whole book, actually just 2 chapters of the book. And the book we're going to be reading today is Love Does by Bob Goff, Discovering a Secretly Incredible Life in an Ordinary World. And it looks like this with little balloons on and a blue cover. I absolutely love the way Bob writes, the way he expresses his faith, the way he uses his day-to-day lives and the things that have happened in his life, just connects it with his faith journey and with his relationship with God. And so today I'm going to be reading the first 2 chapters. Sit back, grab some tea, and yeah, just enjoy me reading to you. I've never done this before, so I hope you enjoy it. If you haven't checked out his books yet, I'll link them down below. I bought my copies of these books at Koom Books, so they are available in South Africa. But let's get right into the book. We're going to start with the introduction. Love Does. I used to think I needed an office to be a lawyer, but now I know all I need is an island. I do all of my best thinking on Tom Sawyer Island at Disneyland. There's a picnic table at the end of a little pier right across from the pirate ship. I suppose most people think this place is just a prop because there are a couple of wooden kegs marked gunpowder and some pirate paraphernalia hung over the railings. But it's not just a prop to me, it's my office. All the times I've gone, I've never seen anyone sitting at my table on my pier or any real pirates on the pirate ship. I guess that makes them my table, my pier, and my pirate ship. Lawyers just decide stuff like that. While I'm willing to share my table and my pirate ship, truth be known, I only want to share it with people who can dream. We all want to have a place where we can dream and escape anything that wraps steel bands around our imagination and creativity. Tom Sawyer Island is a place where I conspire with people, where immense capers have been launched, and where whimsy runs wild. The return address for many of the stories you'll find in this book is, in fact, that pier on Tom Sawyer Island. What I like the most about Tom Sawyer Island is that it's mine. I'm a good sport about sharing it with other kids and visitors, but the whole thing is mine nonetheless. Something happens when you feel ownership. You no longer act like a spectator or consumer because you're an owner. Faith is at its best when it's that way too. It's best lived when it's owned. I have a season's pass to Disneyland and I can take a train there anytime I want. If I want to take a friend, I have an old classic motorcycle with a sidecar, a Harley Davidson Springer Softail I keep in the garage for special occasions. It's the kind of motorcycle you'd see in a picture under the title Whimsy in the encyclopedia. It's cool, it's blue, and it's loud. I like riding it because I'm fully engaged while getting from here to there. I also like that I can bring a friend along as well. When I pass by people, they smile because they've never been in a sidecar. But I can tell they wish they were the passenger. Whimsy is a lot that way. It needs to be fully experienced to be fully known. Whimsy doesn't care if you are the driver or the passenger. All that matters is that you are on your way. Here's a strange truth I've noticed. Almost everyone knows about Tom Sawyer Island at Disneyland, but most people don't go. Maybe it's because it's surrounded by water and you have to take a raft to get there. But it's really not that tough to do. Lots of people want to go, and some people even plan to go, but most forget or just don't get around to it. It's one of those, we'll do that next trip kinds of places for a lot of people. Tom Sawyer Island is like most people's lives, I think. They never get around to crossing over it. Living a life fully engaged and full of whimsy and the kind of things that love does is something most people plan to do. But along the way, they just kind of forget. Their dreams become one of those we'll go there next time deferrals. And the sad thing is, for many, there is no next time. Because passing on the chance to cross over is an overall attitude towards life rather than a single decision. The sad thing is, for many, there is no next time. Because passing on the chance to cross over is an overall attitude towards life rather than a single decision. They need a change of attitude, not more opportunities. There are no admission requirements at Tom Sawyer Island. It doesn't matter how tall or short you are, old or young, religious or not. There are no lines on Tom Sawyer Island. It can be whatever you want it to be. And you can do countless things there. Most of them involve running and jumping and using your creativity and imagination. It's a place where you can go and just do stuff. In that way, it's a place that mirrors life well. At least the opportunity to do much with our lives. From my office on Tom Sawyer Island, I have a fantastic perch to look around and see how a sea of people live. Tom Sawyer Island isn't a ride. It's not just about distractions or thrills, and it's not the kind of place you go to be entertained either. It has all the potential you bring it, nothing more, nothing less. And to find out just how much that is, all you have to do is show up. You don't need a plan, you just need to be present. And somewhere in each of us, I believe there's a desire for a place like Tom Sawyer Island. A place where the stuff of imagination, whimsy and wonder are easier to live out, not just think about or put off until next time. This is a weighty thing to think about on my island, but I often consider what I'm tempted to call the greatest lie of all time. And that lie can be bound up in 2 words: someone else. On Tom Sawyer Island, I reflect on God, who didn't choose someone else to express his creative presence to the world, who didn't tap the rock star or the popular kid to get things done. He chose you and me. We are the means, the method, the object, and the delivery vehicles. God can use anyone for sure. If you can shred on a fender or one best personality, you're not disqualified. It just doesn't make you more qualified. You see, God usually chooses ordinary people like us to get things done. And as I sit on my island, it becomes clear that we need to stop plotting the course and instead just land the plane on our plans to make a difference by getting to the do part of faith. That's because love is never stationary. In the end, love doesn't just keep thinking about it or keep planning for it. Simply put, love does. Okay, I'm going to continue and I'm going to read chapter 1 with you. I'm with you. I used to want to fix people, but now I just want to be with you. When I was in high school, I met a guy named Randy. Randy had 3 things I didn't have: a Triumph motorcycle, a beard, and a girlfriend. It just didn't seem fair. I wanted all 3 in ascending order, and I asked around and found out Randy didn't even go to the high school. He just hung out there. I'd heard about guys like that, and I figured I should keep my distance. So I did. Later, I heard that Randy was a Christian and worked with an outfit called Young Life. I didn't know much about any of that stuff, but it helped explain the beard and made it okay that he was hanging out at the high school, I guess. Randy never offered me a ride on his motorcycle, but he tried to engage me in discussion about Jesus. I kept him at arm's length, but that didn't seem to chill his interest in finding out who I was and what I was about. I figured maybe he didn't know anyone his age, so we eventually became friends. I was a lousy student and found out I could take a test to get a certificate that was the equivalent to a high school diploma. I couldn't figure out how to sign up for the rest though, which on reflection was a pretty good indicator that I should stay in high school. My plan was to move to Yosemite and spend my days climbing the massive granite cliffs. At 6 feet 4 inches and 220 pounds, I didn't really have a rock climber's build. I wonder what made me think there was a rock climber in me. When you're in high school, you don't give much thought to what you can't do. For most people, that gets learned later, and for still fewer, gets unlearned for the rest of their life. At the beginning of my junior year, I decided it was time to leave high school and make the move to Yosemite. I had a down vest, 2 red bananas, a pair of rock climbing shoes, $75, and a VW bug. What else did I need? I'd find work in the valley and spend my off time in the mountains. More out of courtesy than anything, I swung by Randy's house first thing on a Sunday morning to say goodbye and to let him know I was leaving. I knocked on the door, and after a long couple of minutes, Randy answered. He was groggy and bedheaded. I'd obviously woken him up. I gave him the rundown on what I was doing, and all the while Randy stood patiently in the doorway, trying his best to suppress a puzzled expression. "You're leaving soon?" he asked when I had finished. "Yeah, right now actually. I said as I straightened my back and barreled my chest to show I meant business. Look, Randy, it's time for me to get out of here. I just came by to thank you for hanging out with me and being a great friend. Randy kept his earnest and concerned face, but he didn't say a word. Oh, hey, I inserted. Will you tell your girlfriend goodbye for me too? You know, when you see her next? Again, no words from Randy. He had this weird, faraway look on his face, like he was looking right through me. He snapped back into our conversation. Hey, Bob, would you wait here for a few seconds while I check something out? No sweat, Randy. I had nothing but time now. What did I care? Randy disappeared for a few minutes into the house while I stood awkwardly on his porch with my hands in my pockets. When he came back to the door, he had a tattered backpack hanging over his shoulder by one frayed strap and a sleeping bag under his other arm. He was focused and direct. All he said was this, Bob, I'm with you. Something in his words rang right through me. He didn't lecture me about how I was blowing it and throwing opportunities away by leaving high school. He didn't tell me I was a fool and that my idea would fall off the tracks on the way to the launch pad. And he didn't tell me I would surely crater even if I did briefly lift off. He was resolute, unequivocal, and had no agenda. He was with me. Despite the kind gesture, it was pretty odd to think he wanted to come along. Sure, I guess, I said half-heartedly. You sure? Yeah, Bob, I'm in. If you wouldn't mind, what if I caught a ride with you? Randy stood with a determined look. So, let me get this straight. You want to drive to Yosemite with me? Right now? Yeah, that's right. I can find my way back after we get there and you get settled in. I'm not sure why I accepted Randy's generous self-invitation. I guess it's because it caught me totally off guard. No one had ever expressed an interest in me like that before. Sure, I stammered as we both stood awkwardly on his stoop. I guess we should get going then. And with that, Randy closed the door to his little house and walked side by side to my VW bug. He plopped into the passenger seat and threw his stuff on top of mine on the back seat. We got to Yosemite before nightfall and it occurred to me for the first time we had no place to stay. We had a couple of sleeping bags, no tent, and very little money. We stepped towards the back so we could make our escape if an upstanding tent renter showed up for the night. Fortunately, no one came, and the next morning we woke up to a chilly but glorious morning in Yosemite Valley. To the north of us, El Capitan soared 3,000 feet straight up like a huge granite soldier. Half Dome dominated the landscape to the east. These were my companions. This was my cathedral. I was in the valley-wide living room of my new home. Now it was time to get a job and settle in. I rolled over in my sleeping bag thinking about how great it was to have Randy with me. I was a little nervous, but also excited about my newfound freedom. I was a man now. I felt my chin for any sign of whiskers. Nothing yet, but I shaved anyway, just in case. Randy and I dusted off the stiffness that comes with tent camping and went to the Camp Curry Company cafeteria. I thought I could get a job flipping pancakes in the mornings, which would leave the rest of the day to climb. I finished the job application in front of the manager, handed it to him, and he gave it right back, sternly shaking his head no. He didn't even pretend to be interested, but I was secretly thankful he at least humoured me enough to let me apply. No matter. Undaunted, I went to one of the rock climbing outfitters with a storefront in the valley. I told them that I'd do whatever they needed. I was sure that what I lacked in experience, I could make up for what I lacked in maturity or raw intelligence. They said that they didn't have any work for me either and that jobs were tight and almost impossible to get in the valley. I walked out of the store discouraged and looked at Randy, who was leaning against the VW. Rather than feeding my discouragement or saying, I told you so, Randy fed my soul with words of truth and perspective. Bob, you can do this thing if you want. You have the stuff it takes to pull it off. These guys don't know what they're missing. Let's try a few more places. And then, just like he had said the day before on his porch, Randy reiterated his statement. Either way, Bob, I'm with you. His words gave me tremendous comfort. I applied at nearly every business in the valley and struck out every time. There were simply no jobs available and no hope of one opening up soon. The evening approached as the sun sank low in the hills. It was one of those sunsets displaying the kinds of vibrant colours that would have made a painter's canvas look overambitious. But I was still heartened. This sunset was real. I was in Yosemite and my friend was with me, and I still had a shot at my dream. Randy and I headed back to the campsite and snuck into the same tent we had commanded the night before. I didn't sleep well long as I sorted through my very short list of options. There was no work, I had no money, I was a high school dropout, Randy snored, and I had to go to the bathroom. That about covered my list of problems from least to greatest. The next morning came with a crispness that only fueled my anxiety. Randy stood next to me in his sleeping bag, gave a couple phlegm-filled coughs and said in a much too cheery voice, "Let's go climb some rocks." We headed to the foot of one of the monolith cliffs and bouldered for a couple of hours, talking trash to each other about who was the better climber. By midday, we headed back to the valley to see if any businesses had miraculously decided to expand their operations overnight. The shop owners had quietly met somewhere when they learned that I was arriving in the valley and were conspiring against me to dash my dreams. The same rocks I'd come to climb were now beginning to look like barricades. I applied at the remaining small storefronts I hadn't tried the day before. Do I even need to waste my breath to tell you what happened? Randy and I sat on the front bumper of my VW Bug and leaned back against his flimsy and slightly rusted hood that buckled slightly under our weight. The sun was getting low in the valley again, and the granite cliffs I'd hoped to count as neighbours were casting long, dark shadows on the ground, each of the deepening shadows painting towards the road exiting the valley. I only had a few bucks left after buying gas, and Randy offered to spring for dinner. As we walked back out to the car after eating, I turned to Randy and said, "You know, Randy, you've been great coming with me and everything, but it looks like I'm striking out. I think what I'll do is head back and finish up high school." After a short pause, Randy said again what had become a comfort to me throughout the trip. "Man, whatever you decide, just know that either way, I'm with you, Bob." Randy had been with me, and I could tell that he was with me in spirit as much as with his presence. He was committed to me and he believed in me. I wasn't a project, I was his friend. I wondered if maybe all Christians operated this way. I didn't think so, because most of them I had met up until that time were kind of wimpy and seemed to have more opinions about what or who they were against than who they were for. Without much more discussion, Randy and I exchanged a silent look and a nod, which meant we were done. Without a word spoken, I hopped in the driver's seat of the car, Randy hopped in the passenger seat, and we followed the path cast from the long shadows the day before. I was going back. We didn't talk much as we left Yosemite Valley, or for much of the way home, for that matter. A dream of mine had just checked into hospice, and Randy was sensitive enough to know I needed some margin to think. We drove for 5 or 6 quiet hours. Every once in a while, Randy would check on me in his confident, upbeat voice. "Hey, how are you doing, Bob?" We pulled down some familiar streets and into Randy's driveway. There was another car on the drive next to Randy's that looked like his girlfriend's. She visited often. We walked up to the front door and he opened it, and I walked in behind Randy, uninvited, but somehow I still felt welcome. And on the floor I noticed a stack of plates and some wrapping paper, a coffee maker, some glasses. On a couch there was a microwave half in a box. I didn't understand at first. Had Randy just had a birthday? Was it his girlfriend's? A microwave seemed like a weird way to celebrate someone's arrival into the world. I knew Randy wasn't moving because there wouldn't be wrapping paper. Then from around the corner, the other half of this couple bounded out and threw her arms around Randy. "Welcome home, honey." Then the nickel dropped. I felt both sick and choked up in an instant. I realized that these were wedding presents on the floor. Randy and his girlfriend had just gotten married. When I had knocked on Randy's door on that Sunday morning, Randy didn't see just a high school kid who had disrupted the beginning of his marriage. He saw a kid who was about to jump the tracks. And instead of spending the early days of his marriage with his bride, he spent it with me, sneaking into the back of a tent. Why? It was because Randy loved me. He saw the need and he did something about it. He didn't just say he was for me or with me, he was actually present with me. What I learned from Randy changed my view permanently about what it meant to have a friendship with Jesus. I learned that faith isn't about knowing all of the right stuff or obeying a list of rules. It's something more costly, because it involves being present and making a sacrifice. Perhaps that's why Jesus is sometimes called Emmanuel, God with us. I think that's what God had in mind for Jesus, to be present, to just be with us. It's also what he had in mind for us when it comes to other people. The world can make you think that love can be picked up at a garage sale or enveloped in a Hallmark card. But the kind of love that God created and demonstrated is a costly one, because it involves sacrifice and presence. It's a love that operates more like a sign language than being spoken outright. What I learned from Randy about the brand of love Jesus offers is that it's more about presence than undertaking a project. It's a brand of love that doesn't just think about good things or agree with them or talk about them. What I learned from Randy reinforced a simple truth that continues to weave itself into the tapestry of every great story. Love does. So I'm going to stop there. If you want to check the book out, please go to your local Coombe Books, or I'll also leave the link down below. This is a beautiful book. As you heard, there's a lot of personal stories, and I just love how in the end of every chapter he links it to what he has come to find about his Christian journey, or what God is trying to tell us in our day-to-day lives. And so yeah, love does. Thank you for joining me while I read this with you today. See you tomorrow for the next video. Bye.